Okay, so inside this this bed lift here, or not bed lift, but this compartment, I shortened it a little bit because I needed some space for another project. But here I'm going to put these little tiny shallow storage units. So I cut these strips out of 1/2-inch plywood. They're inch and 5/8, which is slightly bigger than the 80/20. And so I want it to be flush with the top, and then I cut a groove. This is just a saw width blade groove. So just whatever the width of your saw is. For mine it's 1/8 of an inch, and so I'm going to use 1/8 plywood in here, and this will be for shallow things like, you know, t-shirts, maybe socks. You know, just it gives a pretty good sized storage space, and then takes up some of this waste. So the distance between here is all lost space, so I'm recapturing some of that. So I've cut 4 pieces, and I made them just long enough to go to the corners so they fit inside, and I'm using the drop-in or the spring T-nuts. And I have 4 sides, and so now I need to cut my plywood. So the distance is going to be the distance from here to here plus 1/4, and then same with this one, distance from here to the front of the wood there plus 1/4. And that'll give me a little extra to go into this groove. Okay, so I marked where the 80/20 bracket comes to, because that's where this will sit, inside that 80/20 bracket. And so now I'm just taking the piece, putting the groove on the plywood. So I find it's helpful to kind of run this up like that, just to kind of clear off any extra. And then I take a dead blow hammer and just tap it just a little bit, not hard. Just kind of work your way down. If you wanted a stronger joint, you could glue this. That sounds pretty solid. And there it is right there. It's all the way in the slot. And then I just need to put this one on and then drop it in. So that's about the right size. My measurement is good. It'll be tight, but seal it up. That's pretty close. Kind of flush. So I've already pre-positioned the T-nuts so that it just goes right in. So I still have 2 more bolts in the back that I have to put in, but I'm out. So, but anyway, that just shows you that even in this little space, you can get quite a lot of storage. It's kind of just lost space if you don't, so why not? So you can see on this side that I'm not really losing much in the way of space. I'm just kind of recapturing what was already there. So it's just this, whatever this gap was. So dimension wise, that's about 19 by 24 by 1.5 inches. So between the two of these, that's almost 0.8 cubic foot of space, of stored space. So that's pretty good. Okay, so I'm looking for a solution for a collapsible step to get into the bed. And so I found this product online that was pretty cool, but it was super expensive. It was like $600, and I thought, well, maybe I can make that, you know. So this is my attempt at it. So this piece was originally going to go on my wall for the battery side, electrical side, but if you remember, I dropped to 1/2 inch instead of 3/4, but I had already had this one covered, and there's another half to it somewhere around here. But so I thought, well, I'll just use this. And so I drew my pattern on the back, and then the way that I got these cuts with the table saw is to put the table saw down. So first I marked my fence for where the middle of the blade comes up. And then I marked at 3/4. This is the maximum width here. And I marked for 3/4 inch plywood, how far does the blade come, and that's right here. And so then I set my depth. So here's 1.5 inches. Up my line with where the blade's going to come out after I go through the wood. So in this case, I cut up to here, pop through. As soon as it popped through, I started pushing until this line lined up with that line, and that's where I stopped. And so on the other side, you can see it gets close, but it doesn't go past that line there. And so now what I can do is I can take a jigsaw and go inside here and finish the cuts, and that'll allow me to use this out of one solid piece without having to slice and then put it back together. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm going after. I cut it all down. I originally had a strip going up over this, and I chose to get rid of that because it didn't seem really necessary. But here's what's going to happen. It's going to flop down, and then I'm going to have steps. So I used just like hinges here just to like try it out. I don't really like that, so I'm going to try something different, because this right here, all the weight is going to be on that hinge. Same here. This one here, I don't know, it's not as... So I think what I'm going to do is create like a little barrel that rests on this wood here, and then have a pin going through all the way, so that it's more like just a long rod going through down here actually. And then that way it'll be resting on the plywood, not on the hinge, which would be stronger. The other thing is this is very wobbly, so you definitely need this one side of this to be secure so that it will it'll stand vertically. Now if you had the pin hinge, you could go either way. So like this would go this way, and it would also continue this way, but because of the type of hinge I have on here, that won't work. Oh, so, and then once I get it in here, then it'll shut into a thin space. So I think what I'm also going to do is I'm going want to double up the plywood so that this is 1.5 inch thick, not just 3/4. So that'll give it more strength, because it does, I can feel it bow a little bit when I stand on it. And probably if I didn't jump on it, I'd be okay, but I just want to make sure. Okay, so to strengthen this up, 3/4 is a little flimsy, so I just took 1/2 and a 3/4 and I glued them together. So I just spread glue back and forth and then kind of smoothed it out. You want just enough so that when you crimp on these, you get a little bit of glue squeeze out. So that tells you you have enough. But it's a good way to get a really strong piece of wood. So this will be 1.25 inches thick instead of 3/4. And I got this well clamped. You always need a lot of clamps when you're gluing like this. I could probably even use more for some of these bigger gaps here, but I think it's going to be okay. If you don't know, wood glue is very strong, so it'll actually be stronger than the plywood itself as far as pulling apart. If you were to try and rip this apart, it would actually break at the wood rather than the glue. Another thing you can do if you don't have clamps and you don't care about the back or the front, like say I'm going to cover this with a coin mat or something, you can use screws. So like a drywall screw will really clinch down on that, and that'll give you a good clamp. And you don't have to leave them in, you can leave them in, but the screw will act like a clamp to keep these two together. And you can put in as many of those as you need. Okay, so I've done some plunge saws with the table saw. Now this is probably the better way to do it, with the a track saw if you have one. So right here on the track saw, there's a little line there, and there's a little line right there, and that tells you where the blade's gonna come at maximum. So I know if I line this up to where I want my cut to start on here, then I know that the blade's not going to go further that way because I lined it up with that line. And then I just push it forward along my line until I reach that line. And I was able to fit it in here too, it was just barely big enough to fit on these parts right there. And so now I have a really good cut there, and I used the track to make sure that it was nice and straight. And the other advantage is the kerf on the track saw is much smaller than the kerf on the table saw. So it's pretty close to the size of my jigsaw blade. So I can just continue these corners with the jigsaw, and all I'm doing is just cutting away just a little tiny bit of material. The only tricky parts are going to be right here, these little tight corners, because you can't really get at that with the track saw. You can also plunge cut with a jigsaw. It's a little trickier. So basically what you'll do is you'll set it up like this. You'll start your blade going, and then you'll slowly drop it into your line while you're moving it forward. But you need kind of a long run in order to do that, so I don't know if that would work there. And it may not be as accurate as the track saw is. But right now I'm just going to continue cutting away this line with the jigsaw. Okay, so this is where it's going to sit. Where did I put my, oh, here we go. So this is where it's going to sit. What I did is I took the router and put on a large round over bit, and then just kind of smoothed out both sides of this, and also on the steps, so it creates a nice profile on the step edge. And I'll go through and sand all this when I'm finishing up. So basically the idea is I marked this one with here, and so where you cut is where you start your step. is going to be determined from how far from the floor. So in this case, we have about a 7.5 inch step, and with the board on it, on top of it, that's about 8.5 inches. And then my next one up is about 7-inch span. That one could have gone up a little higher if I want them to make them even, so that would get you closer to the top of the bed. But I'm kind of winging this right now, so but I made them both the same size, and then you stagger them. So you stagger them so that this is the height of your first step. That's there. This is the height of your second step, and then you just cut out the length of the step that you want. So the longer your step is this way, the wider it's going to be when you're climbing up into the bed. So in this case, my step's going to be about that wide. So now what I have to determine, because this has to split, I want to know where do I cut on this to make it even. And so basically it comes down to how high is the floor to the middle of this, because that's the pin where where the step is going to swivel. And I determined that that's about 8 1/4. Put the step in there. So the step's going to sit up a little high, and you can see it's kind of lined up close to the 8, and so I'm going to go about 1/4 inch higher than that, and that'll give me some room on both sides to make it look a little uniform. So that's how high the step is. So that means that when this side folds down, that's how high it has to be to the middle of here. So the middle of there, so what I need to do is measure 8 1/4 down from where that pivot point is right there. So for the back, you want to cut across here at whatever whatever the height was that you determined you needed here. So it's going to cut across here, and then I'm also going to cut across on this side, but because I'm putting it on top of 80/20, it's going to come down and it's going to rest on that 80/20. So I need to make it 1.5 inches higher than it is on this side. And of course the reason for this little jog here is because you need a place to put your pin. So once you know where your pins are, that's your swivel. And I'll put a link to the pins that I bought. I'm hoping that they're going to be strong enough. They're from Lee Valley Tools, and they're a spring pin. So you drill in here, you push it in, put your step in, and then let it go, and it should go into the hole in the step. And you'll have 2 of those on here, 2 up here, 2 here, and 2 here. So you need 4 sets. Okay, so here's how this is going to sit in here. I still need to put a lock of some kind to keep it from unfolding, but right there's my latch to the 80/20, and I tried the pins, the Lee Valley pins. They didn't work. They worked fine in this area here because there's a lot of wood, but they didn't work fine on these little things here. As soon as I stepped on it, it just blew them right out. So I went with a hinge on there, and on the other side there's a hinge. And so basically what happens is it comes down here, and we have our step. And I've stepped on this up and down a couple times, and it's pretty sturdy. So the front rests on the floor, the back rests on the 80/20. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one of those barrel locks to lock it in here, and then when it's up, I'll lock it in right there. So they'll have a little loop up there for it, and that'll keep this from moving too much. Yeah. So there's my hidden stairway. Yeah, I definitely need something to prevent it from wobbling around. And then I'll probably have some kind of cover over this whole area that will open up and then reveal the staircase. Okay, so here's the final door. We're still going to paint it and then put some grip tape on the steps. But I installed this little bar here so it's not as wobbly. And so when I pull it out, it just comes out here, pop that up, and I also push it back down because it'll fit in that 80-20 slot. And that makes it kind of stay in place. But it's pretty strong. I'm 220 pounds, so that's it.
Put it away too.